Daywalkers and Night Stalkers. It's me, your twisted Southern Horror Queen, coming to you live from under a full moon right here in southeastern Louisiana. Hope your week is going awesome so far. You got your Monday behind you already and your Tuesday behind you too. So hey, you're rolling now. It's almost hump day. Yeah, y'all know what to do with that, right? So glad to have you joining in tonight. We're going to be having some crazy conversations here on the show. I'm quite positive. Seeing a little bit of a lag going on. Not real sure what's happening here. Am I live? Give me some comments. Let me see. Anybody hanging out with me yet? Because it ain't looking good right now. Very interesting. Karen's here. Okay, well, at least I know I'm live. I'm not seeing any feed. How's everything looking on your end, Gavin, Karen? Because I'm not seeing it on mine. I don't know what's going on this computer. Hey, John, glad to see you joining in this evening. Yes, we're going to have some pretty crazy conversations. Yeah, let me know if you've got video on this, if you can hear me all right, because I'm not getting it on my end. I don't know what's happening with my computer. But I need to know if everything is cool with you guys. Trying to scroll down now. Hey, Leanne, glad to see you joining in. Not getting any comments back. Karen, you got video? You got audio? Let me know something real quick. Okay, well, John says I'm looking beautiful, so apparently there's video. I can't see anything, folks, so y'all bear with me. I can see your comments, so that's awesome. I'll keep going because I know that at least I'm live and you guys hopefully can hear me. So before we get rolling this evening, just got to give a shout out to all of the sponsors. First up, we're going to do Hawaiian Island Shine, and this is the product of the month. I have no video, so I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Give me a shout out. Let me know if you can. This is the Diamond Shine. Diamond Shine is the wax that Hawaiian Island Shine has, and it is something that I highly recommend. It is a fantastic product. So definitely, two of the things that somebody says they lost me. Hopefully they can find me again. Let me close that up real quick. Two of the products that I highly recommend from Hawaiian Island Shine are definitely the Wash and Wax and the Diamond Shine. That is a killer product. Saves you a whole lot of time in between details because just you can ride through rainstorms and all that road muck and everything else, and it just kind of rinses off your car. So that's kind of awesome. That's Robert Forrester. He says, "Oh, I found you again." Okay, well, that's awesome. I'm glad. Thank you for the feedback. Kind of running blind over here. Now I've lost my comments. Robert is talking to me through Messenger, so not real sure what's going on. We're going to have some technical issues tonight, it appears. Well, that's okay. We're going to keep rolling. So also Naked Wines, top of the list, one of my favorite sponsors. That's right. They help promote a lot of small vineyards out there that normally wouldn't get put on your grocery store shelves. You can't find these guys in Walmart, but they damn sure deserve to be there. There's some fantastic wines. Go to nakedwines.com. I have a $100 voucher for you if you want that discount. And definitely pick you out a cases worth of wine. You can mix and match, do all reds, all whites, whatever it is that your little heart desires, and have that shipped to your house with $100 off your first order. That's insane. And there's all kind of little lagniappe goodies in that first case as well, so make sure you check them out. Also, if you're waking up in the morning, you're having your coffee, and you're not leaving a wet spot, you're drinking the wrong coffee, go to authorlyngibson.com and check out Coffee Shop of Horrors. They have incredible blends of coffee for Keurigs, for whole bean, whatever you need for your coffee maker, they've got it, and some crazy flavors. So check them out. Use code EDGE2020 and get 10% off of your entire order. Also, don't forget about Wrought Ink. Yes, those are the guys that make these Louisiana Urban Legend t-shirts. They are in New Orleans. This is the Axeman shirt. I'm holding it up to the camera, but I have no visual, so I don't know if you guys are seeing that. Give me a heads up. let me know you can see the t-shirt. But yeah, check them out. You can also find their Etsy page or a link there at authorlyngibson.com, and use code Horror Queen and get 10% off. And also our newest sponsor at the Edge Radio US. Yes, we have a CBD sponsor. Crescent Canna is straight from New Orleans, another local company. They have a full line of CBD products, even for the pets. So definitely everything you need there for yourself as far as topicals, tinctures, whatever you need, they have it. Use code EDGE 2020 and get 30% off of your entire order. You can find their link again at authorlyngibson.com. So check that out, authorlyngibson.com. Go to my sponsors and you will find a whole bunch of cool stuff right there on that page. I'm going to try to catch up on the comments. Hey Janice, good to see you. Leanne says she shared it. Thank you so much. Hey Dan, nice to see you this evening. Dan Bedell says he's getting some video feedback. Well, at least you got some kind of video. Hey Glenn, good to see you this evening, sweetheart. John says he's got good video, so it must just be on my end. I don't know what's going on, but thank you so much for letting me know what's happening. Ed Miller, nice to see you, sweetheart. He says he drinks gin, so tonight we'll confuse him. That's all right. Mix and match, Ed. We can do that here. Gavin says his internet's acting up, so it must be a charter thing somewhere worldwide. Hey, Freddie Roseman's in the house, my favorite anime artist. Glad to see you, my love. Thank you so much for joining in. Oh, I forgot one of my sponsors. That's right, Big Time Vapes at 711 Memorial Boulevard. Look, Freddie's got the Author Lynn Gibson website right there in the comments, so check everything out there. You can also find some pretty crazy horror novels. Hey, Susie, nice to see you. She's joining in from Florida. Weather's nice there. We got some tropical storms brewing out there in the Atlantic, so everybody hold on to your ass, especially all of us along the coastline, right, Susie and Glenn? Trying to catch up on these comments one more time before we get rolling. Stephen Bavmore, nice to see you guys. John Diggins, before we start the show out, he asked if I would share some of my ghost experiences with you. And I think the best one to share would be the earliest one that I can remember, vividly anyway. Sometime right after my 4th birthday. My father bought a house in Pearl River County, which was where he was raised, and moved into it. It was a very old house at the time, and it's still there, so it's even older. Went in and started remodeling it. You guys know what happens when you remodel an older house. Yeah. Well, I think this one actually came with me. I was maybe a little bit old after my 4th birthday. Woke up in my bed and there was a very tall man standing next to me. He was very peaceful. Kind of looked like an old Kodachrome photograph. It wasn't in color, but he wasn't black and white. Kind of, like I said, Kodachrome. So he just kind of stood there looking at me, and I wasn't scared and didn't feel intimidated. No reason to freak out or anything. I just kind of laid there and looked back up at him, and he stuck around for a little while, and I was little. I went back to sleep. That was the first time I saw that gentleman. I've seen him many, many times since then throughout my life, and I guess I was probably a teenager when I finally actually saw a family photo with the gentleman in it. He was standing there, had on a white Oxford shirt with the sleeves rolled up, was buttoned down, had suspenders on, slacks, and just so happened he was dressed very similar to the way he was dressed in that photo when I ran across it years and years later. So yeah, it was definitely a family member checking in on me. Pretty cool, huh? Like I said, he's been around, and he still visits from time to time. Very calm spirit. I think he just likes to check in. All right, so I have absolutely no video. Facebook is telling me that they're having trouble playing the video, but as long as you guys can see, I don't need to see myself. I've been there. I know that horror. Okay, so in the teaser for tonight's show, Glenn Harrison from Hardcore Paranormal started this madness out. Yeah, he posed a question to me a couple weeks ago, and I'm sorry I missed last week's show. Um, Sinus, summer cold, all those wonderful things all kind of rolled into one. I'm still having a little bit of trouble with the thing, so you'll hear that a few times tonight. But he asked me what my opinion were on the Jinn. And I've run across those critters once or twice in doing some research, but never really thought a whole lot about them. And there's a couple of cases that we've talked about here on the show more than once. And he said, well, what do you think the chances are that may have been a Jinn instead of a poltergeist or demonic possession or a witch? And I said, I never really thought about it. Let me do some digging into it. So I had a little bit of time to do some digging. Hey, Karen Butler, my love. Teresa, nice to see you, sweetheart. Thank you so much for joining in. And I went back through my notes because I knew I had done a little bit of research on them in the past. And I thought tonight we would start out with the first time that I actually ran across something having to do with the Jinn. And it's a pretty cool little story. It takes us into Egypt, where there was this legend about an apartment complex in Alexandria, and I thought it was pretty interesting, so I looked into it. Well, this building was actually constructed back in the 1980s, not 1880s, but the 1980s. That's when the foundation itself was going in. Well, when that was happening, the owner decides that he's going to rip some pages out of the Quran and set them into the wet cement. Now, of course, he had good intentions. But first off, the destruction of this Islamic holy book is staunchly forbidden. So I don't know if he put some kind of juju on the foundation of this apartment complex, or if he summoned something. So anyway, in this area there was back then, and there still is, a shortage of housing. And the owner suspected that that building was going to be jam-packed full of families real quick, fast, and in a hurry. And he thought that by putting those pages of the Quran into the foundation, that he would be protecting both the building and the tenants. Well, that's not exactly how it worked out. So the first renters turned out to be this couple that was just about to get married. And the legend here starts when this couple starts moving their things into this apartment building. And of course it was just finished, brand new. They started going in there and placing all their furniture. They get everything packed in their little apartment. They closed the door and they left the building, and they were going off to go do some stuff to get ready for their wedding. Well, the next morning they go back and they find that all of their furniture was either falling down the staircase of the building or it was already in the street. So they start picking up and salvaging what they could, and they put it back in their apartment and kind of scratched their head and figured somebody was just being an asshole, and they went on about their business. But they come back the very next day and the same thing had happened. So they tried it again. They put all the furniture back in the apartment, and of course these things just kept happening. So according to these newlyweds and the people who were in that same area, they saw this furniture being thrown down into the street again while nobody was present in the apartment whatsoever. This other couple that tried to move into the same apartment, shortly after they get there, they get to their new apartment, and they're greeted by a cat that was sitting next to a large pool of blood. And the cat was just kind of sitting there licking the blood off of its paws and kind of staring at the new tenants as they were standing in the doorway. Well, that pretty much ended it for this couple too, because hell no. So by now, rumors of something evil being attached to this building had made their way around town. And even though there's this massive housing shortage, nobody's wanting to move into this brand new beautiful building. So along came the thrill seekers, and among them was a police officer that on a dare says he's going to spend the night inside this building all by himself. Well, legend has it that the next morning he was found wandering around out in the streets naked and completely insane. So exactly what was it that was in that building? Was it haunted? Was it jinxed? It's a brand new building, and as far as anybody knew, there had never been any kind of trauma on that lot where it was constructed. So that only leaves the act of mutilating the Quran as the root of the cause. Well, a lot of people seem to think that this act opened a portal for something evil, namely a jinn. Now, I've always been under the impression that a jinn was kind of like a male genie, and apparently that's not exactly the case. Both Islamic and non Islamic heritage distinguish angels and jinn and demons as three different types of spiritual entities. The lines between the demons and the jinn are uh, kind of blurred in a lot of ways, so it's very easy to confuse those critters. Hey, Karen. Oh, I see she's talking to somebody on the side. I love it when the creepy kids get along. So, um, I had often assumed that the jinn actually were demons or were the fallen angels, and that being named jinn and having their own distinct personalities was just part of the heritage from the areas that they're, of course, more frequently seen and are frequently active in, I guess would be the way to put it. But that's not exactly the case. In folklore, jinn share a lot of the characteristics with demons, as both are associated with mental illness, diseases, and possession. However, those traits don't appear within the Quran. The Quran refers to both humans and jinn as taklan, which means accountable ones, those who have free will and those that are going to be judged according to their deeds. Well, since demons are exclusively evil, they are taklan. Demons and angels have a prescribed destiny. So, where did they come from then, right? Well, Allah says in the Quran that there's a quote in there. It says, "And we did certainly create man out of clay from an altered black mud, and the jinn we created before from scorching fire." Two completely separate incidents are originations. So Allah is saying that the jinn were created from fire and before man. But why? Allah says, "And I did not create the jinn and mankind except to worship me." So the purpose of the jinn's creation is pretty much the same as a human, to worship the creator of all things, whatever you may call that deity. The Quran was revealed for jinn and man alike. So the Islamic faith believes this. They think that the jinn are like us, and they think and they reflect, they eat, they drink, they get married, they have kids, they can be good, they can be bad, they can live, they can die, and they will be questioned on the day of judgment. That is a whole different entity than what I had ever thought the jinn were. Yeah, Glenn, yeah, the jinn are definitely interesting. So, how are they different from us? Well, there's quite a few ways they're different from us as well. They're not visible to the human eye, but they can make themselves appear to us as a person or an animal. Ere the cat by the puddle of blood, right? So it's also said that they have a much longer lifespan than we do, and they have the ability to travel long distances really fast, kind of like transportation. Remember, these are very spiritual beings from what everything is saying. So, God has given the jinn these powers and abilities as a test for them. Now, they're forbidden from using them against His creation, us, but much like humans, they typically have an evil streak. And there's a legend that states an entire group of jinn converted to Islam and became Muslims when they heard the Prophet Muhammad reciting the Quran. Some of these jinn are good and they listen to the commandments of Allah. And as a matter of fact, there's an entire chapter in the Quran named after them, in which the belief and activities of the jinn are further explained. But there's a flip side. At one time, there was this jinn that was so good he was allowed to pray with the angels. Again, they're distinguishing two separate entities. They're putting a jinn with the angels in this holy scripture. Then Allah created man and told the angels, including the jinn who prayed with them, to bow down to man, which at that point in time was Adam. Well, the jinn refused out of arrogance and pride and perhaps jealousy. So, this is what kind of triggered my thoughts into thinking they may have been demons, and maybe they were cast down among those angels that were cast down in the revolution in heaven. But I'm still not thinking that's the case with further investigation, Glenn. Jinn have kids. That's what they say, John. I've never seen a baby Jinn. I don't know what's up with that. But this Jinn's name, anyway, was Iblis, or as he is known in Christianity, Lucifer. He was cast out of the rank of angels and allowed to roam the earth, swearing that he would try to mislead man until the end of time. And so far, he's made pretty good on that promise. He is, I believe, the shaitan, the devil, and some jinn choose to follow his path. Allah says in the Quran, Iblis said, "My Lord, because you have put me in error, I will surely make disobedience attractive to them on earth, and I will mislead them all, except among them your chosen servants." That is, if you have access to the Quran 15, verses 39 through 40. So basically, what we in our culture have been thinking was that the jinn were some evil male genies, when in fact, in this Islamic culture, the jinn are basically demons. Kind of madness, right? Anyway, so I looked around a little bit to learn more about the Islamic belief concerning jinn, and here's what I found with that. So it seems that the Islamic belief divides beings into these three different groups. There are angels made of light, the jinn, of course, made of fire, and man made of earth. Now, angels are considered neither male or female and have no free will. We already knew that. But the jinn do have genders, and they do have free will. This is why Satan is considered to be a jinn, as angels do not have the ability to go against their creator. For this reason, they're seen as the dark ones of the three, and we, of course, fall somewhere in between. Some of us a little more darker than others. Now, just as we know there are to be several forms of and levels of demons, the same is said to be true with the jinn. There are the Maharid, and they are said to be the most powerful. They're supposed to be very large, very loud, just like the genies or the jinn of old are described. Now, these dudes are the worst of the badasses, and they're said to be very malicious and a form of pure evil. Now, an interesting footnote. Sleep paralysis is thought to be a jinn attack by many sleep paralysis sufferers. In Egypt, as discovered by a recent Cambridge study, this study found that as many as 48% of those folks believe they are being assaulted by the jinn. Among all of those sleep subjects, 95% would recite verses from the Quran during sleep paralysis to prevent future jinn attacks. That sounds very familiar to me. Never have considered it having been a jinn, but I do have sleep paralysis, I guess is the medical term for it. You know, and that's all fine and good. And yes, I say the Lord's Prayer to get myself out of it, and eventually I'm able to actually speak it and move and wake up and make myself get up. But the fact that there is another presence in the room when going through all of this, I don't know whether it's a jinn now or a demon or a ghost, or I don't know what the hell it is, but it visits me about 3, maybe 4 times a year, and it has actually been about a month ago since I had one of those episodes. So now Glenn Harrison, I have no idea exactly what this sucker is that is causing my sleep paralysis, but yes, he is still visiting. Possibly it's a jinn. Wonder if there's any amulets for jinn. Okay, so out of all the different forms and levels I've found, these dudes have got to be the ones responsible for sleep paralysis as well as possession. Everything that I've read so far insinuates it's the Marid that are the most pure form of evil, and they get off on attacking us as mankind. Um, yeah, Ed, there's a whole lot of ifs and ands, and I have a feeling that I could spend several months studying these suckers and still not have 100% accurate answers, because there's such deviations in between uh, the angels, the Nephilim, the demons, and now these jinn creatures. But the whole fact of the matter is these jinn seem to be some separate entity. Very interesting. Now, next up, after some naked lines, are the level that they call the Efreet. And these guys are said to be very intelligent and very cunning. Um, they're thought to live in very complex societies that are similar to ours, but they tend to prefer living in caves, Glenn Harrison, or in underground dwellings. Though definitely demonic, they are portrayed as having the ability to change their nature, to become pious, and to become good. Now, in the Quran, King Solomon is said to have had power over the tribe of Ephraim, who performed various tasks for him. Isn't that interesting that this creature from Islamic belief from out of the Quran has actually made an appearance in the King James Bible alongside King Solomon, who he himself was quite controversial. Very interesting. So this next type of jinn is known as the ghoul, and his legends have traveled north and west to become a very common English language term for the undead monster. Pretty close to its original Arabic connotations. Ghoul are thought to be these zombie-like jinn who haunt graveyards and prey on human flesh. They are strictly demonic and incapable of goodness. Often portrayed as nocturnal, the ghoul is supposed to be a one-eyed creature with a piercing red pupil that prefers eating the flesh of humans while they're still alive. It can morph into different forms like an animal or a devil, or it can disappear altogether. It's said that when a ghoul is struck with a sword, it would beg for another slash to be put out of its misery. But back in the day, any noble knight knew better than that. When a ghoul is struck with a sword once, it dies. But if it's struck a second time, it comes back to life and eats you. So make that first one count, right? Now we know. Next up are the Sela. They're said to be very talented shapeshifters who are more tolerant of human society than the other types of jinn, and most often are said to be maidenly female. They're extremely intelligent, of course, but are most rarely seen of all the types of the jinn, and they appear only sporadically in folklore. And then there are the Vitala, and these are said to be the original vampires. They're a semi-malevolent spirit from ancient folklore that can possess a human corpse and prevent them from decaying in order to trick these human beings into believing that they're just another ordinary person. However, the Vitala can also change shape at will, and they are thought to be natural psychics, able to foretell the future and gain insight into the past, as well as read the thoughts of others. That's very pertinent. Remember that, the Vitala. That's going to come up in just a few minutes. So I really had no idea that the jinn were such evil entities. So yeah, I definitely learned a little bit while digging into the history and the legends and all this religious material. But I thought that while we were on the side of the globe that we may want to look into a few other legends over there. And I'll have one coming up. It's called the El Nadaha, and it's another Egyptian legend. It originates from out of the Egyptian countryside of the Nile Delta. Now, folks there claim that this beautiful and mysterious woman appears in the fields at night. Now, El Nadaha comes out of a water cavern, sometimes waits on the shores of the river and the surrounding bushes. But what's she waiting for? Well, of course, she's waiting for a victim. And that's when she gets her sights set on one, and it usually ends badly. Here's what happens. So she'll softly call the man's name, causing him, psychic, to become bewitched. In a chant-like call, she continues speaking his name until he drops whatever he's doing and whoever he's with to follow the sound of her hypnotizing voice. And this poor bastard then finds himself lured into the Nile, where she drowns him most of the time. But there have been a few occasions where the Nadaha fell in love with the man that she's calling. Now that's not really a good thing either, because she takes that poor bastard into the underworld and she marries him. But eventually she kills him and buries his bones in her cavern to keep him from escaping and revealing the secrets of her world. There's also another legend that circulates around Egypt, and it's been there for centuries. Actually, it's been there since the time of the pharaohs. And this critter is called the El Salawa. It's an evil-looking creature that's said to be a wolf-jackal hybrid. It can only be found in remote places like in the mountains or deep in the desert. And guess what else is found in those kind of places? Ancient tombs. That's right. Yeah, the tale actually originated in the time of the pharaohs. And everybody knew that if you were going to try to trespass around the pharaoh's grave, the Salawa was going to come for your ass. But in more modern times, grandparents would tell a different story to the kids. One that includes a man and his wife, and this wife's sister, who transformed in the Salawa every night. And that version goes a little something like this. This is all pertinent. I want you to keep all these legends in mind. It's going to blend together here in just a minute. Is she anything like a banshee? Kind of, sort of. It seems like she kind of gets off on some of the same things that the banshee gets off on, Teresa. So these two women would go out in secret every night, and they'd dig up people from their graves because they were hungry, and they weren't grave robbers. They were looking for a meal. So these two chicks would devour a fresh human corpse in just a matter of minutes. Well, one evening the man wakes up, the husband, as they're sneaking away. So he gets a bright idea to follow him. So he's standing in the shadows and he's watching his wife and his sister-in-law dig up these fresh graves, and they're eating the bodies that were buried there. So, needless to say, the poor dude freaks the hell out. But instead of giving himself away, turns away from this horrific scene and he goes back home. Probably for a drink or something, wouldn't you think? Well, anyway, the next morning he confronts his wife, and she gets furious that he had spied on her. She thought about killing him on the spot, but for the sake of their two children, she lets him live. And that night, she and her carnivorous sister decided they were just going to up and disappear. Now, I told you guys all of that so we can talk about this. Glenn Harrison and Brent Swancer have looked into these creepy critters as well. Now, Glenn posed this question to me, as we said at the beginning of the show. And I thought, as well as he, that these two cases might have something to do with a couple of cases that we've talked about frequently here on the show. So, witchcraft is often associated with the jinn around the Middle East. It's said that a sorcerer may summon a jinn and force him to perform certain tasks for her. Some summoned jinn may be sent to a chosen victim and cause demonic possession, such as summonings, which were done by invocation, by aid of talismans or satisfying the jinn, thus to make a contract. Jinn are also associated with soothsayers. Soothsayers reveal information from the past and the present, and the jinn can be a source of past information because their lifespans exceed those of the humans. So in the present, they can easily watch their target go about his daily life without having been seen. We've established all that. Now, this dude named M. Nadine, he's a Muslim scholar. He describes a book that lists 70 jinn led by Fuctus, not fucked us, F-U-Q-T-U-S, including several jinn appointed over each day of the week. Now, Bayard Dodge, who translated Al-Farist into English, notes that most of these names appear in the Testament of Solomon. Again, not a coincidence. Also as a collection of late 14th or early 15th century magico-medical manuscripts from Ocaña, Spain, which describes a set of 72 jinn termed Talaquit, again in Fuctus, blaming them for various ailments. According to these manuscripts, each jinn was brought before King Solomon in order to divulge their corruption in residence, while the king jinn Fictush gave Solomon a recipe for curing all of the ailments associated with each jinn as they confessed their transgressions. A disseminated treatise on the occult written by Al-Abbasi called the Shamil deals with all these subjugating demons and all the jinn by incantations, charms, and a combination of written and recited formula to obtain supernatural powers through their aid. There are said to be 7 kin jinn, and they're traditionally associated with the days of the week. With all that being said, let's take a Reader's Digest version at some of the highlights of the Bell Witch case. You guys remember that, right? Okay, so here's a little reminder for you. John Bell and his family buy this 320 acres in North Carolina to establish the family homestead and farm. All is well for the first 13 years until John spotted and shot at some hideous creature he saw out in his pasture. Now, the Scylla and the Vitala are both said to be shapeshifters, right? It's said that even if or when the Scylla take human form, that there will still be some kind of animal-like characteristics. That means that they don't shape shift in entirety, i.e. the dog-faced man. The Vitala are the jinn labeled as natural psychics as well. Hang on to that thought, folks. So after that, the family starts seeing these other weird-looking creatures on the property. The kids start being plagued with night terrors, and the sounds of knocking and scratching could be heard on the outer walls of the home after nightfall. Remember talking about that, you guys? So then all the knocking and the scratching moves inside the house. Along with it came the sounds of gnawing, chains being dragged, and the sound of someone choking. Sounds like an ailment, right? Ed Miller says Solomon was always messing with the supernatural. Yes, he was. He actually summoned a ghost. He summoned several witches after he banned them, but he still summoned them. Also in the Bible, folks. So, Betsy, which was one of the young daughters, she was the one that was being tormented physically the most. She was being scratched and slapped and bitten, but John was the one that was suffering with choking, and his throat would visibly swell. And he stated that it felt like there was a stick wedged in his windpipe. Well, at this point, that's when the family calls out for help, and an investigation is open, and folks start coming in from miles and miles around to watch all this insanity while it's going on. And it's said that at that point, the Bell Witch, who had at this point gained so much strength that even though she could not be seen, she was known to hold conversations with people, even shaking some of their hands. The Bell Witch was very knowledgeable in things from the past, present, and future, and would often answer questions or make predictions for gathering crowds, all while attacking the Bell family on a daily basis. That sounds like a whole lot of jinn characteristics to me. How about you guys? Also keep in mind, there's the possibility that there may have actually been a witch. If these jinn are so associated with witches, that would have a very logical explanation. Then again, maybe there was no witch the entire time. So anyway, after 3 years of these endless torments, John Bell finally dies on December 20th, 1820. And the Bell Witch, of course, took full credit for his death. Then she left with the promise of returning in 7 years, which she did. She returned to the home of John Bell Jr., and she had a very long conversation with him about his past, about his present, and about his future, and even made several predictions for his life's outcome. Now, I'll add to this, we've also talked about the Bell Witch Cave in the past as well. Folks, there's been a lot of documentation here. Visitors have become very ill. They've been physically attacked. They've been held down in place. They've seen the shadowy form of what we assume to be the Bell Witch, but remember what we just said about the Efrit. Yes, they all like to live in caves. And also, if you remember, when we described the Bell Witch Cave, there's a very narrow entrance, and then it opens up, and then it's a very narrow entrance, and then it opens up into a huge hall, and then there are several small impassable tunnels throughout that have never been explored, because they are too small for the human form to fit through. The more you look at the Bell Witch case, the less the entity looks like a poltergeist. Absolutely, Glenn. I told you I was leaning to your way of thinking. Scary, right? So let's look at the Serency case. I know you guys are going to remember this as I start talking about it. Alan Powell Serency was a sawmill operator. He was also the founder of a very small town in southeastern Georgia, which of course he named Serency. Well, everything was cool until one day he came back from a trip to Hazelhurst in October of 1872. His typically quiet and very well-maintained house was rocking. It looked like he'd walked in during the height of a wild frat boy party. Well, in a letter that he wrote to the Savannah Morning News, he said, "A few minutes after my arrival, I saw the glass tumblers begin to slide off the slab and the crockery to fall upon the floor and break. The books began to tumble from their shelves to the floor, while brickbats, billets of wood, smoothing irons, biscuits, potatoes, tin pans, water buckets, pitchers, etc. began to fall in different parts of my house. There have been many other strange occurrences about my house. These facts can be established by 75 to 100 witnesses." Well, at first all the doubters started to lay it all off on an earthquake, but it's highly unlikely that Serency's house was the only one in town that suffered earthquake damage, right? It's an earthquake, not a tornado. But even a tornado theory wasn't going to fly, because the madness this dude came home to and went on constantly for weeks after that, and sporadically for years thereafter. Yeah, definitely not a tornado either. So once natural disasters were ruled out, the blame was then shifted to a ghostly haunting, of course. But the fact of the matter was, there was no apparition being seen or documented by Serency or any of the other witnesses. This case was a very solid example of poltergeist activity, which of course is a psychic phenomenon rather than one caused by a residual or intelligent haunting. Now, most poltergeist cases do center around an agent, usually a female of the age of puberty. And at that time, the Serency family had 8 kids. There was a whole different level of insanity going on in that house, ranging in age from 3 to 21. So there you go. Now, news of this haunting spread like wildfire, and soon Serency was the center of a media frenzy. Reporters and curiosity seekers from all over the country, even England and Canada, started descending on this little bitty town like buzzards on roadkill, and they're all, of course, hoping to see this activity firsthand. There were very few that showed up that left disappointed. The Serency occurrences were a lot like the Bell Witch case, and the activity was very extreme and violent. Witnesses heard and documented unexplained screams, voices coming from empty bedrooms, plates and platters and books flew from their shelves, ink bottles leapt off a table, doors opened and closed by unseen hands. The hands of a clock spun faster and sometimes even worked backwards. A chime actually struck 13 on one of the clocks in that house. Hot bricks were known to fall from out of nowhere and land on the roof and out in the yard. A pair of boots walked across the floor on their own. Meal times, yeah, it was a party, right? Objects on the dinner table would dance around. Logs would roll out of the fireplace. And one time, several hogs and chickens appeared in the living room from out of nowhere, scaring the hell out of one of the reporters. And of course, you had your typical bed covers that rolled up and down all night long. In an effort to rid his house and his family of this terrifying activity, Serency sought the help of clergy, scientists, as well as spiritual mediums and psychics, but nobody was able to help. Eventually, this house burned down in 1925. So Serency moves his family to a new home on the other side of the country, thinking that they had rid themselves of all this madness, but guess what? That shit went with them. It wasn't until Alan Serency's death in 1877, it is said, that the haunting finally stopped. Some people, however, say it continues to this day around the town of Serency. In fact, there is a famous ghost light there, a very bright yellow ball of light that appears along the railroad tracks. So, A couple things here that stand out to me are the the fact that no one was seeing or documenting any kind of entity, but the two most curious occurrences to me were, of course, hearing the voices and the boots that walked across the floor. And then, of course, there's the sudden materialization of livestock in the living room. Not typical of a haunting or poltergeist phenomenon. Yes, it does happen, um, but it's not exactly standard. Poltergeist means noisy ghost. You do hear things, the scratching, the banging, yada yada yada. Scratching also being a sign of demonic possession, one of the first stages. However, this fits very neatly into some of the things that we've just found out about these jinn. Teresa says there may be a nest of them. Very much so. Ed Miller says, I wonder if any cave paintings were done by jinn. You know, that's a very interesting thought there as well. Very possible, especially being that they like living in those holes in the ground. Um, anyway, each occurrence here does, like I said, fit very snugly into cases of the jinn and witchery, which now we know both go hand in hand. So, um, like we said, the jinn were basically the foot servants of witches. They figured out how to control them and create these contracts with them. If you're a witch out there and you know how to do that, let's talk and see if maybe we can get the sleep paralysis thing to go away with me, and that way at least we'll know if it's a jinn or not. So I don't know the history of the ground that the Serenci supposedly settled, but one thought that does cross my mind is that it may have been owned previously by a witch, or he or she may have cursed the ground. She may have been evicted from the ground for some reason. Maybe she was buried there, and when Serenci started digging and building there on that property, he might have disturbed the witch's grave. That could have possibly released a multitude of misfortune on himself and his family, courtesy of this witch's hex, which of course was hand delivered by her own personal jinn. Same basic thing as the Pharaoh's tombs. They were supposedly guarded by these entities. Remember all of these tombs that say not to go in there or you'll be cursed. Well, now we know that they weren't necessarily gods or goddesses or demons or monsters that were assigned to watch over them. They were jinn, and the jinn have a thing for protecting those graves, and they also are very loyal to their contracts. Once one is written and agreed upon, whether it be written in blood or whatever the hell they write a jinn contract with. So I thank you, Glenn, for triggering this. It's caused a whole world of confusion because everything was black and white pretty much. It was poltergeist or demons before, which have their own neat little categories that they can be stuck into. But now Glenn has to throw in the jinn, which just screws it all up. You got a whole other critter out there and several different levels of this critter that's quite capable of fitting in with witchcraft, with poltergeist, with demonic possession, with the whole damn lot. So, yeah, now we don't know exactly what kind of creepy critter we're dealing with anymore. Thank you so much, Glenn. No, thanks for giving me the heads up. It was very interesting doing the research. I'd actually like to spend a lot more time digging into them, simply because they go way back into prehistory and they're mentioned in all that religious scripture and religious texts. I love digging into that. So then they are conjured. Witches can conjure them. Yes, they can be conjured, not necessarily conjured, though, Teresa. From what I say, or from what I see, they exist whether they're summoned or not. Some of them, like we said earlier, have an evil streak and may just decide they wanted to screw with the Serencis for the rest of his life. I don't know, but it's very possible. Could have went one way or the other. It's just a very interesting case. Thank you again, Glenn, for bringing it up. I enjoyed doing the research. Thank you guys for hanging out with me this evening. If there's anything you'd like to hear about on an upcoming show, chances are I've dug into it a little bit in the past and may know a little something on it, but definitely always willing to do a little bit more digging. Love doing that research. Hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your weekend, an awesome weekend. Try to stay out of trouble. If not, make sure you've got bail money. Creepy chick kisses coming at you. Don't forget to check out authorlynnGibson.com. Show some love to some of my fantastic sponsors. There's a little bit of something there for everyone, no matter what you're into. authorlynnGibson.com. Or you can always follow me here on Facebook. In the meanwhile, you guys have a freaking fantastic weekend. Stay safe, stay germ-free, keep the mask on, and I will see you back here next Tuesday at 7 Central, 8 Eastern Time. Thank you, guys.